So previously we spent a couple of weeks thinking about synchronous tools, and so if I'm using memes and instant responses on a range of social media are the lenses through which many of our students and possibly their friends and families are seeing the world, then it's likely that they'll be fairly comfortable dealing in those kind of shorthand ways of communicating, and they might be less comfortable in engaging in more of a long form conversation online. Now this week we are going to start looking at asynchronous learning tools. Now those are the tools used by students and teachers who aren't generally online at the same time, or if they are, they aren't responding in real time as you might on something like Facebook Messenger or even the chat within a video meeting room. Now, these asynchronous tools can offer space, time and room for discussion and thoughts and responses to breathe a bit more, and with hopefully some more substantial engagement. Now, to you, this might sound less like the active discussion as you might want to get in your physical classroom and more like a correspondence course. However, asynchronous conversations don't mean that we can't still have substantial discussions. It's just that the pace of discussion might change a little bit, and it's likely that everyone involved is going to have a bit of a learning curve. So if you're just starting out in this, rules and structures can help you, and also your students. But the structures you put in place and the rules you create will vary depending on your context. You know your students, you know what will work and what is going to be less successful. Now, it may be the case that if you've already had synchronous discussions, live meetings with your students, you might have put some guidelines in. It might be about conduct and ethos, don't swear, be kind, those sorts of things, rather than necessarily detail about the form and structure of what they're going to write, because obviously if they're speaking in those sessions, it's a bit harder to kind of monitor and mandate everything they're going to say. But if it's something where they can edit things, you've got a bit of a chance to really shape what they're doing and make sure that they're adhering to certain standards that you might want to impose there. So for example, what structure might help? Would you want to put on a word limit? Do you want to say for one discussion, each student's post, individual post can only be 200 words long? Now, does that help them focus on editing and really focus their thinking, or does it stop them expressing themselves? Does it change that sort of thing? Now, one really important feature of classroom discussion is that they are time limited. It helps focus and helps motivate and helps make sure that you get the responses over a fairly short period of time. So it's likely that you're going to have several of these throughout the duration of any class or a semester or a school year. So what you could do for some of those is put the restrictions on for 1 week or one topic, and for the next week or next topic, take them off. And then do some of that assessment that you might want to do. How do the students feel? Did they feel it was easier to have that restriction? To say, well, I needed to do a bit more editing, it was a bit harder, but I got something that was a bit more focused? Or did they find it easier just to be able to type until they'd run out of things to say? But the flip side is, if someone does that a lot and they write very long points and they make a lot of points in a long piece of text, does that then intimidate other students who are like, well, I couldn't really say that much in response to that because I couldn't write 700 words just as a offhand post. So really experiment with that and maybe learn when to put some of those limitations on and maybe when to let them go. One important question is, are you going to assess what's written? Now, you may be at the stage where that's nowhere near what you want to do, but if you're starting to use these discussions as really important and really potentially powerful tools for learning, you may want to start assessing. Now, there are some topics that won't be accessible. For example, if you're talking about, we're all in lockdown or whatever, and what box sets are we watching, it's not really going to be assessed. And it may be that as you work through these topics, you do want to start assessing them, but a tip is I would say definitely don't do it in the first few weeks. Start to use those first few discussions you might have, not as ones just learning from experience. There will be some good learning in there, but you're not going to start to maybe assessing it until a few weeks in. And in those interim period, you can start to model what good online expression looks like. Remember, all of those rules that you set for the students should really apply to you. You should really, as they say, drink your own coffee or whatever it is you're drinking. And so you really need to model, for example, if you're at the stage where, and you may not be, where you're expecting your students to reference information they found online that they're including in their argument, you need to model how to do good referencing. You need to model how to respond to somebody else's post by maybe asking a question and maybe saying what you've learned. Really start to do that within your 200 word limit if necessary, but really to help them see and understand what good practice looks like, and that's really, really important. And also at that time you've got a chance to do some of that formative assessment, so you can start to say, I'm not assessing you for the next few weeks, but just to say that 2-line response where you didn't really say much, that's not going to be marked well. Here's how you might improve that. And of course you can do that in a post, and you can model in that post how you might pick up on someone, what someone has said, and improve on it. Now the thing that with asynchronous discussion tools is that whereas your synchronous interactions with your students might very well just reinforce what you already know about them, because they're akin to a classroom discussion. Now, there is a chance that the asynchronous interactions you have might surprise you. It's not a guarantee, but it is possible. Now, you do know these students, so you're starting from where they're at, and you've probably got an idea of where you'd like them to be and how developed you'd like their ability to reason and to understand and to listen and respond might be. Make sure you take your own medicine, do that modelling of really good, clear interactions, but then see if they surprise you. Now, maybe it will be that the quieter students might start to sculpt some beautiful prose that they may only ever have done in an assignment that you set them but never really did in the class. But being slightly remote and maybe not intimidated by other people in the classroom might really release them to do that. It might be that the more brash students in your class, who normally dominate with their physical presence and the way they carry themselves in class, they might have words that make just as much of an impact even when you can't see how they carry themselves. But I would encourage you just to take small steps, and maybe, as we've mentioned before, practice with your colleagues. Practice some asynchronous discussions with your teacher colleagues throughout your school, and if you do it well and you encourage your students and you nurture them and you start to model things, there's every chance that you might just see some of them in a new and different light.